Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation. Today I've got a very special guest. Was the manager for Guns N' Roses, Great White, record company executive, producer, author, songwriter. Welcome to Rock Daydream Nation and Alan Niven. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, Alan, you've got a new book that's coming out to all good bookstores everywhere called Sound and Fury Rock and Roll Stories. My first question, what was the actual trigger for you to finally get a book out?
It was if you take a stone and you put it under a tap and you let the water drip onto the stone, eventually, apparently, it will bore a hole through the stone. So if you can imagine how many times I had people saying, dude, when are you going to write your book? When the memory's going to come out? And at one point, I did start to write a conventional rock and roll book, and I found it tedious and boring and depressing. And I actually put it on the shelf for a little while until I had a rare moment of clarity of thinking, and I realized that I'm just the old jukebox in the corner of the kitchen. And if somebody pours me a glass of port, then I'll tell you a story. Pour me another glass of port, I might tell you another one. And of course, the light bulb went on in my head eventually when I realized that's how you put a book together. You don't write a chronological narrative, and the only thing that's really interesting are the stories. Nobody wants to hear about your childhood or your analysis of the people that you're with. If you pick the right stories and tell them well enough, people will figure out people involved for themselves.
Is there any
So,
particular rock and roll biography that inspired you that you thought, because a lot of these rock and roll biographies are quite root, but there's an insatiable thirst by the fans to buy them. Are there any that kind of inspired you that were a little bit out of the box that, hey, I'd like to write a book like that?
no, I really dislike rock and roll books and as a whole. They all have the same story arc, and we have the young bloods who bond together and take on the world and take on everybody else. And extraordinarily, they have some success. And with success comes power struggles, money, girlfriends, wives, mothers, etc., etc. And whatever dysfunctional baggage that the band have brought into the unit starts to get unpacked, the band falls apart, and then you get recriminations, excuses, and blame at the end of the book. And an awful lot of books have that story arc, so I really don't wish to read them. There have been one or two books that I picked up because I went, I really hope this is going to be a decent book. And I have to say that when I read Eric Clapton's book, I was disappointed because my overall sense of it was that he didn't have much of a sense of himself on the page.
Mm.
I had to have a go at Keith Richards' book,
Yeah, I was going to
and
ask about that.
yeah, and for me it was a slog until, off the top of my head, I'd say it's probably about page 252 or somewhere like that, when he started to reveal the tunings that he used when he was recording. And for some reason, from that point on, the book took off and
Yeah.
was really enjoyable. But in general, rock and roll books I avoid like the plague.
Yeah. Did you keep a lot of journals of events so that you were able to map out timelines and concerts and events? Just give some sort of framework for these stories?
Um, I used to keep very simplistic diaries, one line for a date, where I would put down things that occurred on that date that were worth remembering. I once had a file with pages in it, and there were 3 columns. And there was one column for GNR, one column for Great White, and one column for me. And it was just the cities that we were all in and when. I have no idea where that has gone. It's gone with a lot of the other Flotsam and Jetsam. But it is one thing from my old office from back in the day I'd be amused to have again. Because it was from 86 to 91 was a very intense period of time, to the point where I swear to God there was one day when I was at LAX airport heading for the gate, I passed myself heading in the other direction.
Pretty frantic.
Yeah.
Was it a cathartic experience to relive a lot of these events? Maybe painful?
When I did the initial attempt at a manuscript, it was not cathartic, it was depressing. I tended to see the mistakes and the failures, the things that you didn't get right, and all the stupid things that were done that derailed what could have been a better progression. Now, I know that there's just been an announcement there's going to be a new Guns N' Roses record coming out soon. And I'm sitting here saying, well, about time, guys. You haven't done anything since 1991 as a band. You've been creatively impotent through the majority of your prime, which is really sad. I thought GNR were going to be my Rolling Stones. Now go and look at the Rolling Stones catalogue. I mean, you know, I don't think they made much of a worthwhile record since Tattoo You, but my God, what a catalogue of songs they have.
Were there many stories that you just simply could not print? Wild, sordid, get yourself into trouble?
Yes, there were definitely some things that I left out. Hang on, excuse me a second. There were definitely some things that I went, nah, that's not necessarily imperative to have in the book.
For the personal vault, in your vault.
Yeah, you know, there are some things that you remain discreet about.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it was Jack Russell. You know, people used to ask, who's the worst in Guns N' Roses? And my reply would always be the same: Jack Russell.
We will talk about him.
Yeah, he was the very definition of the indulgent hedonist. And for him to be on a level above the guys in GNR, that tells you something, because GNR were not conformists and were definitely a genuine rock and roll band, in that they didn't give a damn about other people's expectations as to what they were doing or how they behaved. It was an intense period. When I'd be driving home down the 405 freeway from up in Hollywood back down to the South Bay of LA, and if I was sitting in my car and thinking it had been a good day, then I knew that there was a phone call that I had yet to return, because there was a problem every single day. Something was always happening. I signed a contract to work with GNR in September of '86, and and this is an overstatement, because there was obviously pleasures to be had beyond that date. But I do tend to mark that date as when the simple joy of rock and roll went out of my life, and stress and pressure and anxiety moved on in.
Can you describe the first time you saw Guns N' Roses? What was the hook that you thought, there's something here that was out of the box that, I need to manage?
I never felt I needed to manage them. I turned down Tom Zutaut twice before. Tom was their A&R man at Geffen. And in his initial cattle call for management, I wasn't interested in being involved. On top of which, I really wanted to concentrate on Great White because they'd had a disastrous outing with EMI. And it took me a year and a half to get them re-signed and to reshape the band and to get it to a point where it should be going. And I didn't want to have my energy dissipated by something else. So I turned Tom down, and then Tom came and asked again. And by that time, I'd done some research on the band. And quite frankly, I looked at him, Peter, and I said, "You're out of your ever-loving fucking mind. Everything I hear about this band tells me that they are unmanageable. They're a disaster waiting to happen, and I bet by the time you get back to your office, there's a disaster occurring." And then he came a third time, and he was actually begging me to pretend to manage the band, because Eddie Rosenblatt, the president of Geffen, was refusing to allow him to start doing any recording until they had management in place. So Tom was saying, "Can you at least," and I'm like, "Tom, what are you talking about, pretend to manage a band?" "All right, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will go and take a meeting. I'll do that at least for you and see where it goes." And in the first meeting I had with the band, only two of them turned up, and one of them nodded out at the table a few minutes after I arrived, which left me with Slash. And I have to say, on that first afternoon of talking with Slash, I was impressed that, firstly, he had English blood in him. Secondly, he was very articulate and showed a prodigious intelligence. And he was very charming. And I thought, oh, there's more to this than I thought. And then when I went to see him at the Troubadour, my main fascination was not with the guitar player or the singer. Slash was drunk and Axel was being Axel on 10. But Duff and Izzy on their side of the stage had this nonchalance and this sense of, I can't avoid the word, I'd use the word cool about them, that was really intriguing to me. The way they carried themselves, the way they played, that side of the stage I thought was really interesting.
Like, the time that you saw them, there was so many clone bands, like hair metal, just clones of clones of clones. Was there something sonically that popped out to you that, oh, this is a bit different? Because Appetite for Destruction and Guns N' Roses was the start of a different sonic direction for hard rock and metal, wasn't it?
Well, if you were going to make a quick response to the demo tape that I got from Geffen, it was a sense that there was a very punk style energy to the band and a carelessness in how they played together that reminded me very much of 1976 and 1977. Now, of course, working for Virgin as I did then, to be in America and bands having that punk vibe was kind of amusing to me, because to me, punk was over by 1977. It was done. But there was a very brash energy to the demos. and there were one or two really good songs on there. The worst song in terms of performance was the one that actually caught my ear the most. There were much better performances on that tape than this song, but this song had something in its lyrical content and its attitude that I found very intriguing, and that was the song called Welcome to the Jungle. And I remember calling Zoot out and saying, listen, we need to really pay attention to this song when we're recording, because I think this is a special song. But the one thing that I knew from the get-go was this was, and you've got to remember the context of the environment. Radio was still very much Bad Company Journey. And there was no way you'd listen to the demos of GNR and going, oh, we'll fit right in. I knew that we were going to have a really tough time at radio. And AOR radio, album-orientated radio, did not play Appetite for Destruction for the first 6 months of its release. We got absolutely nowhere on radio. And it was only after we broke through at MTV that radio started to change and pick it up. And then, of course, when Sweet Child came out, they could cope with that.
I mean, you butted heads, didn't you? Because the record company was very impatient, weren't they? And this is unprecedented now because it's the instant hit, isn't it?
No, it's not an instant hit. I mean, it's an overnight success that took 2 years of work. Geffen promotion guy who was based in Dallas. And after a show, he invited me back to his apartment, and we sat and we had a couple of bevies and enjoyed each other's company. And he said something to me that I think most other people would have taken umbrage and gotten upset and maybe even picked up the phone and complained. But he said, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you what you need to do with your band. And I went, oh, okay. He said, we've got to work through Whitesnake. Then we got to work through Aerosmith. And your job is to keep your band alive until those two have moved through, and then we can focus our promotional activity on your band. So that's your job. Keep them in the game until these two other monsters have gone. And in certain respects, that's how it was, and that's how it developed. Geffen were not impatient to get to us. They had two huge selling acts that they had to support before we could come along and say, well, what about us now? Let's put some promotion into radio. Let's see if we can't get a little further. And there were moments of serendipitous magic. And obviously one major such moment was finally getting MTV to play the video overnight. I mean, it was pack a breakfast and set your alarm clock if you want to see the video. And MTV were astounded that when they put it on overnight, they got response, which you don't get at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they were getting response. And, obviously Jungle really did well at MTV, and that started to break things open.
Absolutely. And I think the strategy in the longer term was better for the band, because a band like Whitesnake had let's face it, maybe a year in that bubble and then went down. Aerosmith are a different sort of aspect, but with Guns N' Roses coming out a little bit later, that sort of probably was in their favor, because they're one of the few bands that really kind of survived the 90s more than a lot of other bands. Do you think that's a fair statement?
No, I don't. I don't think they did survive the 90s. I think they fell apart and they didn't come up with the goods. There was no great creativity out of them in the 90s or the next decade or the next decade. I mean,
No, but
basically,
creatively, yeah, I understand that.
I
But
mean,
in respect of their as a viable concert act, as a selling album, the Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 did sell quite a few copies comparative to a lot of acts around that time.
I had a lunch with Eddie Rosenblatt just as Illusion was being completed. And he asked me, what's it going to do? What's it going to sell? And I took a napkin and I wrote 2 4s on it and gave it to him. And my estimation was that now that we were going to be smart and release 2 single albums instead of 1 disastrous double album, that each would do about 4 million. And in the first year of their release, I was dead on. That's approximately what they did, which, 4 million per title, 8 million in the main, that's really healthy. I mean, when we got to 3 million of Appetite, it was like, oh my God, I don't believe this. And then it was 5, and then it was at 8, and it just kept going and going and going. So you knew that there was going to be a tremendous appetite for whatever was going to follow that. And everybody had the correct perception that Lies was just a toss-off to buy time. Had one great song on it, Patience, one great video. I mean, did very well, but everybody knew it wasn't the follow-up.
Yep.
And of course, Peter would lie there in bed staring at the ceiling and go, how the fuck do we follow Appetite's performance? I mean, just the sense of expectation from people was overwhelming, from the record company, from fans. And that in itself is really stultifying. And Axel's, I understood his thinking. His thinking was, well, fuck it. If we do a double album, it'll take them time to work away through all the material, and it'll be difficult for people to compare a double album with a single album. And that just terrified me, because I thought if we did a double album, we would get hammered by the critics. And one of the things that I explained to Axel was, listen, our following is blue collar, it's working class, it's every dollar matters when you're in Safeway buying groceries. Do you want them to have to dig out for $30 for an album? Why don't we do 2 albums separately? Then they can afford to buy one week and then buy one the other week. And oh, by the way, nobody's ever had the balls to do this, to release 2 albums. So that's what caught his imagination, and that's why he agreed to it. But of course, as you know, Peter, there's no such thing as an original idea. There are only those things that you keep in your mental Rolodex that hopefully you will recall when it's suitable. And of course, my thinking was, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, he did that. He had a double album out, but Polydor also released it as 2 single albums. So it had been done before, but nobody remembered.
Yeah,
Electric Ladyland, obviously.
I think it was an inspired idea, because you look at a band like Fleetwood Mac, how do you follow up Rumours? They put out Tusk, and that kind of stalled the band because it was such an expensive album in its day. So I think what you guys did was quite,
well, it
good,
becomes,
shrewd thinking.
yeah, Peter, it becomes the monster that you cannot escape when you have that extraordinary degree of success and sales, because it is impossible to overcome the expectations. you're very aware that you don't want to make Appetite Volume 2, and you're also sitting there going, I don't think we can do Appetite Volume 2. We've got to say different things in different ways. And it's an extraordinary, difficult thing to deal with, especially when you have David Geffen getting 3 inches away from your face when you're passing him in his lobby and pushing you up against the wall and saying, when am I going to get my fucking record? You got that kind of pressure coming from the record company. And of course, the only thing I could say to David was, when it's fucking ready, David. And then there's what seems like an hour of him boring his eyes into mine as he stares at me, and he just turns around and walks away. So the pressure was absolutely everywhere. And I think there is one good record out of Illusions. There's, a lot of interesting tracks and so on and so forth. It's also the birthplace of Chinese democracy.
Yeah, and that's a whole different path and different story. Look, the band was a mix of different personalities, backgrounds, influences. Was there a natural band leader from the get-go, or were there a few alpha male band leaders and some others that kind of followed?
Stevie was a puppy dog, and his unrepeatable contribution to the band was his enthusiasm and his joy. And he, not the greatest drummer in the world, but he was the one who could play with that vitality and with a swing. Now, this band has not had a swing in it since Stevie's gone. Slash was very much developing being Slash, enjoying the peripheral aspects of being in a band. Axl thought it was his band. Duff was incredibly inebriated most of the time. But for me, the most critical person in the band was Izzy. He was the one who had the taste. His right hand was terrific. I loved the way when he played rhythm, he knew really where to leave the holes and where to push. And as a writer, he had this incontrovertible, streetwise vernacular that, as a writer myself, I was incredibly envious of. I mean, he was to the rock and roll manner born. And for me, Izzy was the single most important element of the band.
Because maybe the musical heart of the band?
He was definitely the element of the spirit of the band. What would you say? He was the cool heart in the middle of the red hot soul of the band. And when I talk about GNR being creatively impotent since 1991, the reason is really simple, and it's not a matter of opinion. It's merely a matter of history, because it's self-evident. They were stupid enough to lose Izzy. And that was fatal. That was absolutely fatal.
Axl is kind of an enigma to many people. He's the enigma of the band, even to this day. How would you describe the Axl that you knew during your tenure as the manager of Guns N' Roses?
Volatile, narcissistic, self-important. He did try to some degree to be a gentleman, but he proved himself not to be. I mean, this is a guy who had a bunch of hired musicians re-record all of Appetite so that he could sell those tracks to commercials and TV and film and cut out the actual members of the band who recorded them originally. What does that tell you? Does that say something about ego and greed?
Well, there's been a lot of bands that have done that, or a lot of artists have done that to, because they want to take it away from the record company. It seems to be a bit of a prevalent thing.
He wasn't taking it away from the record company because at the time he was still connected to Universal. But that's not the awful one and one for all attitude that will generate momentum within a band if you can have that forged. I always look at bands with the allegory of the molecule. The molecule holds together, and not all the parts and ingredients of the molecule are of the same character or same power or same significance. But the intriguing thing is that you take one of those elements out of the molecule and the whole thing collapses. Another way I used to look at bands is, and this is a very broad brush, but I don't often have the sense of, you guys all come from what some of us might call interesting childhoods and backgrounds. The word dysfunction floats around. And in forming a band, yes, there's the drive of the ego, but I think also there's a sense of, I want to create my perfect family. And when you're up against the world, people bind together. I mean, this was a classic of the Motown bands. When they were up against the world, you couldn't get daylight between them. Once they had huge success, all the problems came. And basically, once money and power grabs occur, the dysfunction that was brought from childhood gets unpacked and the thing starts to fall apart. Who's the more important person in the band? Who's the most significant? One of the things I tried to do with everybody I worked with was have equanimity with income. I was very aware, there's no school to go to for management. There's no college course. The industry doesn't want educated managers. They want ignorant managers that they can hornswoggle and get rid of. Intelligent managers are the enemy to a record company. Where was I going with this? But equanimity of income. When you're in that role, it's inherent that you should be observant of the others around you as much as possible and see if you can identify their mistakes so as that you don't make them. And there are countless bands that I could talk about that were wonderful and tight until the publishing checks arrived. And 2 guys in the band got publishing checks and 3 didn't.
And it all changes.
Yeah, the resentment starts to build, and the wives and the girlfriends complain. How come she's got a new car, darling, and I don't? So with everybody, I tried to get complete and equal division of income in the hope that that would keep the negatives at bay for as long as possible. And it was something I learned from watching the early days of Van Halen, because they used to put all 4 of them down as songwriters. I put a twist to it. My twist was, listen, people have their self-respect and their ego, and if 2 of you write a song, you get credited for the song. But all the income generated by that song gets shared equally. And if God forbid, somebody leaves the band and they're a non-writer, then the privilege of being shared with ends. So people get their credit, but we try and hold the band together fiscally.
Absolutely. I guess as a manager, you've got to sort of work out very quickly how to manage various members of the band. Was that something that you came to a view very quickly with Guns N' Roses, how to manage the various personalities within that band?
Well, with that band, it was very clear that no one wanted to manage them. Tom went to everybody. Cliff and Peter, Tim Collins, trying to remember his name, Rod Stewart's management were handling them before me. And my attitude was very simple. I know what rock and roll is. I know how to do rock and roll. And if you want to be a successful band, then you fucking listen to what I fucking tell you. If the singer turns up at SIR for rehearsal an hour late and has some lame-ass excuse, he doesn't get, oh, poor Axel, let me drive over there and be your chauffeur, which is a power play on his part because he wants to spend more time with the manager and have a chauffeur. It's, no, get on a fucking bus and fucking get here. You know, before we went to England the first time, we had a band meeting in the Hell House, just to go over some basics. And the whole band were sitting in and around a sofa and had me sit opposite them. And I remember well, Duff looked at me and he said, Niv, do you think we can do this? And my response was, why the fuck do you think I'm here? Yes, you can do it. I know you can do it. I believe you can do it. Just pay attention and I'll get you through this. You know, and much to my annoyance, you know, I've seen Duff in an interview where he goes, oh, it was so rough for us, you know, we had to borrow money from the techs and so on and so forth. Total fucking bullshit. From the very first in touring, I managed to do the finances in such a way as they got on a bus. They had hotel rooms. They weren't in a Winnebago. They weren't in cars. They weren't in vans. From the very first Cult tour, I made sure that they had the amenities that a traveling rock and roll band needs at a minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you a father confessor to the band? Like if they came with personal, did they often come to you with like outside music personal problems and say, Niv, you know, I want to talk to you about something that's happening in my life? Did that ever occur?
Very little. If a situation became problematical, then you were obliged to insert yourself in some way.
Yep.
I mean, you know, one classic moment is that I go to Stevie Adler's house to have an intervention with him. Sit him down and say, Stevie, this is getting fucking serious. You've got to get a control of your appetites. You've got to get a control of your addiction. You've got to be far more present as a musician in rehearsal, etc., etc., etc. And I turn up there, and there was a guy called Bob Timmons, who was the addiction whisperer to the stars. I mean, he worked with people in Motley Crue and other bands, a lot of other bands. But Bob was a very grounded, very earthy person who had been through addiction and had the ability to talk sense to people. And Bob turned up with somebody else. And we're sitting there in the living room, and half my brain is concentrating on Stevie and making sure that the message gets through. And the other half of my brain is going, fuck me, that's Sly Stone sitting over there. You know, I'm a huge Sly Stone fan. And I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'm sitting in the middle of an intervention with Sly Stone. I mean,
That's
it's
incredible.
bizarre, totally bizarre. How does that happen? You know, and of course Stevie had no idea who Sly was.
Yep. Do you think there was any chance that the original lineup would ever get back together? Because not likely.
I would say that it would be extraordinarily low frequency and mean. That if next year is truly going to be the last touring they do, if they don't get Stevie and Izzy on stage a couple of times, then they are really, really small people.
Mm. Because there was definitely a bit of a fan fervour. Like I think Stevie made it to one gig in Brazil, and there
Yep.
was conjecture about Izzy. Didn't really happen, but there is
Oh,
still that fan appetite to see the original
oh,
awesome band back on stage.
Izzy did turn up for a sound check at a major venue, I think in Texas. Um, and by the end of sound check, he was like, take me to the airport.
Mm.
All right. Twixt you and I think what might have happened there, and I could be wrong, since, Chinese whispers, Chinese democracy, tales down the telephone.
Mm.
But I think what might have happened there was as he turned up and Axel wasn't there.
Yep.
That Axel was at some country in Western Star's house and wasn't there to say hello and be his friend and so on.
It was
And
a
I
bit of
think
a deja vu type scenario.
yeah, and I think he took that badly and said, you know what, fuck this.
Yeah.
And then, and you can find this on the net yourself. He said that he wouldn't be a part of the band because they wouldn't share the loot with him. I think was his
Mm.
phrase. So we're back to fiscal equanimity,
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
which to me is a little bit of a, I don't know what you'd call it, because for me, Izzy is essential in terms of the initiation of the lineup in the band. He should be afforded that respect.
Mm. So how do you think history will look back on that album, Appetite for Destruction? Do you a lot of people say it's a masterpiece, a classic. Do you think that's richly
Oh,
deserved?
after all these years, you've heard it all. Um, and it's almost like a graph that you can put on graph paper. It's
Mm.
brilliant. It's wonderful. It's a masterpiece. It's overrated. I'm bored with it. When are they going to come out with something new? Um, especially,
What's your personal opinion? Real dig deep. What do you, as of today, what do you think of that album? Do you think it richly deserves its masterpiece accolade?
it was a moment, and there was magic in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's essential. It's not just about the record. It's about the context. It's about what else was going on around us, what we were competing with. Um, when I committed to working with them, my assessment was that if I could keep them together and not lose anybody to an overdose, and if I could stimulate sufficient professionalism that I could get them on the road and keep them on a tour, I thought I might actually have a really good underground band. And if we kept going, I thought, I think there's a real reasonable chance that we might get a gold record out of this. Now, if anybody tells you they knew it was going to be the best-selling debut rock and roll record of all time, they're either a liar or certifiable. Nobody knew that at the time, and nobody expected that at the time. But I thought the spirit of the band and the attitude of the band was well worth spending my time with. And bear in mind, we also have pragmatism to take into consideration. My then wife had just given birth to our first child. And if you're a father, you know full and well that the morning of that birth, you are terrified that you now have to be responsible for somebody for 18 years. And what am I doing fucking around playing at rock and roll? I should be having a real career and make sure that the family are taken care of, etc., etc., etc. But even with that within my consciousness, I felt it was a really worthwhile project to get involved with. And I also had another perspective, to be honest. My other perspective is their reputation could not be worse. The expectations are terrible. Eddie Rosenblatt wants to throw them off the label. So if I fuck up, I haven't fucked up something that everybody had expectations of. But if I get something done, then that's going to show people I've got chops. Just as there is no management college, there ain't nowhere you can go to learn how you deal with the onslaught of fame. And here's the other thing, Peter. Everybody knows you're famous before you do. Other people start changing their behavior towards you. And there are little moments that happen when you go, uh-oh, things are different now. You can be in a car going down Manhattan, headed for Electric Ladyland to go to the studio there. And it's you and Slash in the car. And as you're coming down to 8th Street, about to turn left and pull over, you realize that there's maybe a dozen people running after the car. And you look out the window and go, what the? And then you go, uh-oh. So I zip out of the car, ring the bell in the studio, hold the door open. And once I've got the door open, door of the car opens again and Slash dives across the sidewalk into the studio. And we just stand there and look at each other for a moment and go, things are changing, aren't they?
And they can never go back to where they were.
And they can never go back. And that brings you to a point that, Slash and Izzy gave me my most pleasure in that band. But I'm going to make a comment about Slash. I think he has been incredibly gracious in going through 30 or 40 years of being Slash. You can't leave his house and go to the local deli to get some smokes and a bottle of vodka without realizing when you walk in there that the air stiffens and people stop moving and heads start to turn, and that goes on all day, every day. I feel sorry for Axl. When he wakes up in the morning, the first thing he must think about is, am I leaving the premises today? Because the minute he goes down his driveway and through his gate, he's got to be Axl, and everybody is going to go, oh, let me take a picture with you, Axl. Oh, you're fucking great, Axl. Can he go to the store and buy a clutch of bananas without being harassed? No.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because this Chinese Democracy album, which took a squillion years to record, there was a conjecture that he was turning into a Howard Hughes recluse type character that wouldn't leave his mansion.
He always was one. He always was one. I mean, famously, when we got the Aerosmith opening slot in '88, he shut himself in his bedroom to the point where I told Izzy, he's got a fucking tree outside his bedroom. Go climb it and talk him out. You're his best friend. He calls me up at the office and says, I can't do it, Niv. Cancel the tour. There was always that. inclusive fear.
Does this this insecurity flow into him, doing a concert at 2 a.m. in the morning? Like I saw Guns N' Roses, what was it, in the early 2000s. I believe he no longer does that. And he came on at about 2 a.m. in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, are you a musician yourself, Peter?
Yes, I play a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Do you go out and play at a local club or a pub or anything?
Not at the moment, no. But
Oh,
I
you
know,
have.
yeah.
You have. Okay. I have done it once under severe pressure from a friend and a wife, and I'll never do it again. And it went way better than I expected and was rather extraordinary. And it's something that I want to remain as a singular experience in my life. I am not interested in being in a band with people staring at me. I love the studio. I mean, there was a time in my life where I could literally stand in one space and play a guitar for 10 hours straight and think I'd only been there for two. And the wife comes out and says, "Are you ready to eat? You've been here all day." And I go, "What time is it?" And I'm like, "Well, how long have I been here? 10 hours? You kidding me? I thought I was here for two." Point being, as a musician yourself, you're not a frontman, a singer. Guitar player has something solid between him and the audience. He has something he can himself in and not be being aware of the audience. The player, the drummer, everybody who plays has a way of reverting back into their own bubble. Now, go out there with just a microphone on a skinny piece of metal and look at 15,000 pair of eyes staring at you. And you have to invest yourself in those songs night after night on a tour and be convincing. You offer that to me, I'm going to say, "You're out of your ever-loving fucking mind. No, thank you. I would not want to do that at all." And I completely understand where any vocalist, be that Axl or anyone else, might have a tough time walking out on a stage going, "I've got to do this again." The usual magic is you start hard, you get a great response from the audience, and then you get that revolving sense of energy from the stage to the audience, and that carries the singer along. But when you're sitting in your bedroom and saying, "Am I going to go on a stage before Aerosmith night after night and be compared? Do I want to do that? Do I even want to get on a stage in Atlantic City and sing with Mick fucking Jagger?" All right? When it comes down to just you and being the person, that's a thought. I am about to go out on a stage and sing with Mick Jagger. For me, no thank you. So I can understand where Axl had his trepidations, and I can understand where there have been times that he didn't really want to do it. It's something I can comprehend.
Yeah. From an observation from afar, do you think Axl has changed? Because I've seen him recently, a recent tour, and was on time. And I spoke to Sebastian Bach recently in an interview, and he said, "Look, Axl now is different to what he was before." Do you think he's a changed person?
No.
As an observer?
No. What I think is this is, and people have asked the question when they have the nerve to ask me about these things. My observation, and you've got to bear in mind that I have not had a personal contact with him since 1991. But what I say is, well, when I knew him, success didn't change him at all. It amplified him. Who he was just got bigger. As regards him being different today, I'd say yes, he's different today because he has a combination of a mother figure and a maid who has got him through an incredible amount of gigs. And that's what he wanted. I'm not a mother figure, and I'm damned if I'm going to be your maid. And as I've already pointed out, I was not prepared to be a chauffeur either.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk about Great White and the late Jack Russell. Would it be fair to say that this band's career was potential unfulfilled?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, entirely. And your analysis of that is to go back and look at the recorded catalogue between, let's say, just the recorded catalogue, because I mean, if we go back to the very first album on EMI, I have blundered into the video of Substitute, and the lasting impression I have is, wow, that's a pretty smoking version of that song we recorded. It stands up. But there is a very broad catalogue of Great White songs where Guns N' Roses may have had attitude. With Great White, we had sensibility and a broader range of emotion and a broader range of spirit. And part of that was, part of the band not realizing its potential was the fact that I was split between two bands and was having to spend an awful lot of time on G&R. And one of the things that Axl, my favorite thing to say about Axl is, as far as I'm concerned personally, is what we have here is failure to appreciate. All right?
Gratitude.
Yeah, he has none. He never ever said thank you. Never ever. And there were certain moments in the early days where what I was doing with Great White was used to the benefit of keeping G&R moving or putting them in a good place.
Yeah,
Right? But there was a lot of, they didn't have coffee together often, those bands, shall we say.
yeah, I understand. I get a feel with Great White that they weren't quite built for the 80s. If they came out in the 70s, they would have been superstars.
Peter, you are perfect. If you go back and look at initial Great White, you could be forgiven for saying what we have here is a band that wants to be Judas Van Halen. That those were the two bands that they looked at with the greatest respect, and they were trying to ape as much as possible as they could. And at that point, they did not have the character and their personality formed as a band. I mean, you know, one of the things people say about, you know, how do you get bands successful these days? I say you don't, because it takes a long time for a band to form its character and personality. And that usually means an awful lot of gigs. And then you find the character and the personality of the band. But there was a point in '85 when Kendall and Lardy individually came to me and they said, can you be more involved in the composing? Because it's not working with Jack. We're just getting the same old stuff all the time. And I said, are you sure about this? And they said, yeah, we need this. And so that put a slightly broader aspect on my thinking of what is this band and where it's going. And, you know, for one night, we're doing demos in the studio, and between takes of songs that we're building that are, they're good, they're okay, they don't set the world on fire. But between takes, I'm watching Kendall, and he's just sitting there on his own playing blues licks, and good ones. And I'm slow, and I'm dumb, and I'm stupid. But finally the light bulb goes on in my head, and I go, there it is. That's who he really is. He's not K.K. Downing. He's Mark Kendall, and this is what speaks to him. So at that point, I got Jack's voice, and I have to say, Jack, without a doubt, is one of the great rock and roll voices.
Without a doubt, I agree with you. I think
Stunning.
even Robert Plant, I don't know whether he was having a shot at David Coverdale, but said one of the best vocalists out of heavy metal or hard rock, and that's fair praise indeed.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a Robert Plant story. This was at a party in Brazil, and Robert Plant was talking to, help me out here, singer from Def Leppard. Poor
Joe
Elliott.
Elliott. Yeah, Joe Elliott.
Elliott.
Yeah.
And they were having a chat, and there was a friend of mine who was in on the conversation. And Joe Elliott says to Robert Plant, he goes, "Here, you ever heard that guy in Great White? He sounds a bit like you." And Robert Plant looked him up and down and said, "He sounds more like me than I do." True quote.
That's a great one.
But anyway, if you've got Jack's voice and you identify where Kendall is most comfortable within himself, then obviously I'm thinking, given my background, we're going up the wrong fucking tree here. This is really an English blues rock band from the early 70s. And that's where I took it. Starting with rock.
Yes.
You know? No, they
Which
weren't
you incidentally co-wrote.
I co-wrote most of their songs. Probably 50 or 60 of them. But no, we weren't built for the 80s. And I tried to keep us out of the 80s as much as possible. I used to tell the band not to go up and hang out in Hollywood with Nikki Sixx and people like that. And of course, with every musical genre or fad that comes along, you know what the record companies are going to do. They're going to keep repeating the formula until they fucking kill the golden goose. So in the 80s, you're getting more and more of these bands who are using more and more Aquanet. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, we'll survive. We'll try and get through. There aren't many bands who can come up with a performance on a song like Sail Away. And that was released in the apex of grunge. And that year, we beat out Counting Crows for a number of radio plays in the nation, because by then they were counting every single play. And we were the 16th most played song at AOR that year, which was very heartening, because that's creativity and character winning out over the next contemporary fad. And, you know, God bless them all, those bands from Seattle and all the grunge bands. How many of them are out there working now, and how many of them created songs that when we hear them on the radio, they give us a little bit of a lift? Very few.
Yeah. So Jack Russell read lots of stories. He's a larger-than-life character that sort of burned brightly. Was he the most challenging artist for you to wrangle?
Jack, I wouldn't call Jack an artist. Jack was a performer, and a damn good one, and had an exceptional voice. And there's some pretty considerable housework that I have had to do and take the trash bags out and bury them deep. Jack used to say, "They don't pay me for being in a rock and roll band. They don't pay me for being a singer. They pay me for all the goddamn waiting around." When he was on a stage, he could be absolutely mesmerizing and sublime. When he was off a stage, wait for the phone call.
I mean, he suffered many tragic personal issues with the band, substance abuse, his health. Noting that you kind of had a connection with him, did that take a personal toll on you, Alan?
Oh, well, there are a lot of things that took a personal toll on me. For example, and you're asking about fulfilling their potential. Great White are on their first headline tour with MSG and Havana Black opening for them. And it's rolling, and they're rolling through Texas. And we've sold out the Northeast, which is the toughest market for selling tickets, because that's an old Rust Belt area where disposable income doesn't grow on trees. And I'm in LA, and they're supposed to be playing in Midland. And I'd actually picked that day to take my kid to Disneyland. Been a lot of work going on. I thought, we can carve out an afternoon for Dad and the kids.
Yeah.
I'm just going to slip by the office, do a couple of things, and then go pick up the kid, and we're going to do. Phone rings, and it's Oddie, the drummer. And I go, "What's up, Oddie?" He goes, "You need to go to Phoenix Airport and pick up Jack." Say again? "You need to go to Phoenix Airport and pick up Jack." "What do you mean, pick him up in Phoenix?" "Well, they threw him off the plane." "What plane? You're supposed to be in Midland playing." "Well, Jack wanted to come back to LA and see his dealer, and he wanted me to go with him." I'm going, what the hell are you doing? So at that point, I actually flew out to Phoenix. I had a friend, Ray Brown, who made incredible rock and roll clothes, who lived in Phoenix. I called him up and I said, "Do me a favor, get down to Sky Harbor and see if you can find Russell before he gets fucking arrested." And of course, Ray goes down there and finds him holding court in a bar in the airport and drags him back to his house. And I turn up at Ray's house, and he's got eyes like this, like, you've no idea. And I said, "Well, where is he?" He points over his shoulder, and I go, "There's nobody in the living room." And then I look outside, and there's this huge saguaro cactus by the pool, and Jack is sitting cross-legged in front of it. So I quietly pull the door back and walk around the pool and gently put my hand on his shoulder. And he swings around, sees me, grins, and he goes, "Niv, I've got some good stuff for you too. This saguaro has got mountains of wisdom to tell us." That was the end of the headline tour. I had to take him home because I'd rather take him home fucked up than pick him up in a box 6 weeks later because he's overdosed. So that was the end of their headline tour.
Did Jack say thank you to you?
Well, there was a period of time, Peter, where quite honestly, if you'd put me in a room with Jack Russell, only one of us would have come out, and it wouldn't have been Jack. I'd have fucking killed him. All the kit, including, and it's so far back, who cares, a 13-year affair with my then Swedish wife. Think about that, and think about the words I put in his mouth with some of the songs. Oh boy, when I found out about that, that was rich. But Heather and Tony Montana, coerced me to go and see him play a show in Phoenix. And it was actually good to see him. And we picked up our relationship from there because we were friends and we got up to trouble together sometimes. So for the last years of his life, we communicated regularly. And we even did a couple of podcasts together. And until he could not use the phone anymore, we would still talk on the phone. And most importantly, we were laughing.
Yeah.
That everything that we'd been through and all the craziness and all the stupidity and all the idiocy that we went through, at the end, we could both sit there and laugh about it together and remind each other and crack each other up. And that's where we were when he passed.
There was something very likable about him. I went to the whiskey.
Dude, there is no better person to go out and raise hell with. He was it.
I think we call it maybe scallywag. I mean, it's just a rogue.
Yeah.
He's like in that Bon Scott, Bon Scott, AC/DC, in that sort of cut from the similar cloth.
Bon Scott would have sat back in the corner of the room and go, I tell you, mate, I can't keep up with him. He's gone. I'm out. Bon Scott would have said, I'm out, man.
Yeah. I saw him at the Whiskey A Go-Go. They did a crew fest, and he sang a Led Zeppelin song. Fantastic vocals, and I went over to him and I gave him a hug. I don't know why. I just felt I wanted to give him a hug, and I just said thank you for the music.
Bon Scott or Jack Russell?
No, Jack Russell.
Really?
Yeah, I gave him a hug.
What a great instinct! What a great instinct, because he needed hugs.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I just felt I need to give this guy a hug. I gave him a hug. He reciprocated, and I said, thank you for the music. You ever get to Australia? And he said, yep, and I let him go. But he was very frail then, and this was like probably 5 years before he passed, but he still had the vocal chops.
Yes, yeah.
Right to the end.
Yeah. Even when he was slipping off the stool.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, I want to quickly just talk about some other artists that you've had some dealings with, not as is close proximity as Great White and Guns N' Roses. Motley Crue, you were one of the forces that recommended them to Elektra, and you described, I think it was the first album, Too Fast for Love, and you described that as a sonic mess. Do you still stand by those words?
Oh, not sonic mess. I'd rather be more articulate. I'd rather call it a train wreck. In terms.
Did you have any inkling they would be something, a force of nature, and go on to bigger and better things?
I evaluated it within the context of my circumstance, and in my circumstance, it was a rock and roll record that I desperately wanted to bring into the company I was working for then, and I'd been given a cassette of Too Fast for Love, and I didn't know how long I was going to last in LA, so I was traveling light. My stereo was a JVC boombox with a pair of Sennheiser headphones. That was how hi-fi I was. So I sat on the floor. I didn't have furniture. I had a bed, but I didn't have furniture. And I sat and listened to this thing. And I went, it's got attitude, it's got energy. Most importantly, it's got a really good song on it. Piece of Your Action. And my connection then was, that Cheap Trick would be proud of this. It's as good as a Cheap Trick song. So I was very, very determined to get them into Greenworld, and fortunately we did, for everybody. Again, Peter, everybody I've worked with, nobody else has wanted. Why were Motley Crue knocking on the door at Greenworld? Because every other door had been slammed in their faces. You know, I was last chance manager for GNR. Greenworld and myself were last chance indie label for Motley Crue.
But you still saw something at that time that there was a
I saw
little
a number of
iota of potential.
I saw a number of things. I saw a very strong image. I saw a very good drummer. I saw a competent guitar player. The bass player was having as much trouble playing the bass as he was standing up in his high heels. The other thing I saw was the girls who came. Um,
That's the
just
the hook.
after, yeah, just after establishing a connection and a relationship with them, um, they did 3 nights at the Whiskey. And Peter, these girls were stunning, and their clothes were tattered as if they'd been ravaged by Mongol hordes for the previous weekend. And this is how they presented themselves in front of the band. And of course, I may be slow, dumb, and stupid, but I'm looking at these girls and the condition they're in, and I'm going, if they come, guys are going to come. And if guys come and the girls come, we've got something here. We may have something that works.
You've doubled your audience.
Yes, absolutely. Um, did I know that they were going to be as big as they were? No.
Mm.
But in the moment, in my context, with the judgments that I had to make in that moment, it was like, yes, please, let's get this record and let's do something with this band. And of course, serendipitous magic. There's so much about my life that is unplanned. You wouldn't script it, and it was essential. And I'm at the NAM, National Association of Retailers and Merchandisers conference at the Century Plaza, I think it's called, in LA. And I've got a booth up there, and I've got Motley Crue posters up. And this chubby young guy comes up to me and goes, you got anything to do with that band? And I'm like, yeah. So I put the posters up. Who are you? And he goes, I'm Tom Zootout. And I go, and what do you do, Tom Zootout? And he goes, actually, I'm a singles clerk at Elektra. And he kind of puffed himself up a little bit. And immediately my brain was, oh, this is somebody who works inside the company. Because the toughest thing at the beginning of the 80s was actually being able to get through the door of a record company. They were all on signing freezes. They'd just had a couple of really bad years, and they weren't signing things, and they were taking things from Australia and from the United Kingdom, and weren't developing their own acts and talent. So to be able to get into a record company was the big mystery. So I said to Tom, oh, that's interesting. Why don't you come and have dinner with me? And I had this tiny, tiny, tiny little cottage up on Palos Verdes that overlooked the Pacific and Catalina Island. It was a perfection of a place to be, with a huge deck, and you could sit out there and there were wild peacocks wandering around. I mean, how does that happen for a kid from London? How do you find yourself there? But Tom came up for dinner, and I cooked him one of the things I used to cook back in the days when I was a nipper and younger. I cooked him up some roast chicken a la LSD, because my thinking was, we'll find out who this person is if he trips. We'll find out what sort of a soul he's got. We'll find out what sort of an intelligence he's got. We'll find out if he's got a sense of humor. So Tommy came for dinner on the Friday and finally got back to Hollywood on the Monday. And that was the beginning of our friendship, which still lasts to this day. And Tommy wanted nothing more than to be an A&R guy at Elektra. So Tommy and I worked the situation to get Motley Crue through the door. And part of it was, I had managed to lose about 15,000 units with all the associations, retail associations I'd built up with my years of Virgin. And Tommy and I were just lying like flatfish. Oh, 15,000 units? No problem, man. Wait until we get out of LA. LA's taken 15,000 units. And at a lecture, they went, wow, 15,000 units in LA, you better bring them in. And Tommy got them signed.
And the rest, as they say, folks, is history.
Yeah, and the rest was history.
Another artist I want to talk about is Don Dokken.
I
So
love Don.
you passed on signing him to your label Engima, but again, you got him indirectly signed to Elektra. Did you foresee that he would have the career that he would have?
When you're writing your memoirs in your book, it's really hard to avoid sitting there and going, wow, I really fucked that up. And if I'd done that, this would have happened. And you know what? Why the fuck didn't I do that? There's that element of going back through your memory because you tend to look at it in that way. And with Don, and I still have this argument with him, why the fuck didn't you get rid of Lynch? There was one afternoon that Don said, come with me, and talk up your label because there's this young guitar player I want to get into Dokken. And we went to a Denny's and had an early supper with a kid called Warren DeMartini, who could barely order off the menu. He was so green behind the ears. What would Dokken have been with Warren DeMartini instead of Lynch? I mean, there are moments when I actually turn the radio on now, he'd hear a particular Don song, a Dokken song, and I'll go, fucking Lynch. He's completely not in this song. What he's playing bears no relationship to the rest of the song. He's just ego tripping here, you know? And that, I think, worked against him. Don finally got a really fabulous band together. What the hell is the name of the song? But there was Mickey, who's now with the Scorpions, Peter Boltz, who else is in the band? Really, really good band. And their timing was just wretched because that record came out when everybody wanted to see girls with hairy armpits in a video. You know, Nirvana.
Yep. But those Dokken albums, some of them are just great albums, but didn't get to that next level, did it?
No. Two or three things. And these are all things that, you know, I've said to Don many a time to his face, is one, he's not a great front man. I said, the biggest fucking mistake that you made was in taking your guitar off. You had a much greater presence on stage when you played guitar with the band. But he says, well, Cliff told me I had to get rid of the guitar and be a front man. I said, yeah, you're 30 years, you're in your 30s, and now he's telling you you've got to develop a different psyche. No, you should be playing guitar all the time. That's one thing. Don is an extremely good songwriter. He's definitely got his style and his form of construction. You know, you can have other people play songs written by Don, and I'll tell you it's a Dokken song, right? Mm. And I'll tell you another thing about Don. I would never have produced a record in my life if I had not absorbed so much information from him about song construction and recording and so on and so forth. No Don, no Alan Niven producer. Simple as that. I learned so much from him. And of course, you can follow that down the road. No Don, no Alan. If there's no Alan, then there's no Great White. If there's no Great White, then there's no G&R.
Yep.
You know, they came to me because of my relationship with Tom, but also in 1986, the song, and you'll smile at this, the song of the summer in 1986 was Face the Day. That brilliant song that Doc and the Brewsters wrote. I heard that and I went, perfect. I'm recreating Great White as a 70s blues rock band, and this is perfect. And that thing was 17 weeks in heavy rotation on KMET. It was 8 weeks in heavy rotation in KLOS. You could not hear that song on a daily basis. Now, no Don, no Alan, no Great White, there's your line there.
Yeah.
I mean, the people at Geffen said, how the fuck is he getting all this airplay? He works out of a cupboard down in the South Bay. We have the dinners, we have the blow, we have the little envelopes of money, and we can't get that much airplay on any of our new releases. What's going on? What's he got? Well, what I had was a great song, really well performed.
Yeah, and it punches through. A great song's a great song, isn't it?
Yeah, a great song is a great song. And there again, we go back to serendipity and magic. That was pure magic. That was not contrived. That was an audience response that was entirely genuine. What was her name? The music director at KMET. She'd been playing the record for about 8 weeks, and she called me up and she said, do you have anything else? We've been on this in heavy rotation for 8 weeks. I've got to move on. I said, darling, we don't have another song like that on the record. But do me one, Judy McNutt. God bless you, Judy McNutt. And I was helping her put records away in the library. And I said, Judy, do me a favor. Do one more week of call-out research on the song before you walk away and see what happens. And a few days later, I got a phone call from her going, you're not going to fucking believe this. This song is still growing. I'm going to bang it for another 8 weeks. And she did. 16 weeks in heavy rotation. So, yeah, pure magic and a wonderful person and a wonderful moment. You cannot always guarantee that with all the money and the mechanics and infrastructure that you can manufacture a band and a response to it. And the record companies used to try and do that. Every now and then someone's going to come along who, for whatever reason, they have the spirit within them and they connect to the audience, be that Great White or Guns N' Roses.
Were there any acts that you wish that you could have managed and have taken them up the rung? You look from afar and, gee, I'd like to, I would have liked to have managed them.
World Party, Tears for Fears. Because at the end of the day, Peter, what are we fucking doing here? What's this all about? Why have we got these trucks outside and these buses? Why are we concerned about our merch sales tonight? What are we doing here? What's the point and the purpose? And for me, at its highest level, rock and roll suspends alienation and brings people together by their own consent. It creates a momentary community of shared spirit. And the bands that lose sight of that are just entertainers. It's why I fucking love Doc Neeson so much. He had something to say, and there were significant points of view. He was burdened with the Brewster brothers. Oh, God.
I recently interviewed Buzz Bidstrup, and he mentioned you.
He did?
Yeah, very warmly. And he was talking about how you said that the problem with the Angels or Angel City is they're stuck in a rut of writing the same song again and again.
That was part of it. You know, I mean, for me, the Angels, I would describe it quickly as thinking man's AC/DC. You know, there's another band that's just done the same riff and the same vibe and the same beat over and over again. But the difference for me between the Angels and AC/DC was intelligence. Doc had one, and the Angels benefited from it. I would love to have seen the Angels go further, but they shot themselves in the foot. I got them a deal at Chrysalis.
Right.
Flew them up to America, put them into Ardmore in Memphis with, oh God, what's his name? Guy did a lot of engineering for ZZ Top. And here's another piece of fucking stupidity on
Is
my
that Bill
part.
Ham? Bill Ham?
No, Bill Ham was the manager.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. My brain is for what it's worth. But anyway, here was my stupidity. They were all my peer group. They were my age, all right? They had a catalogue of some really terrific material. They had a new lease of life. They had a really good budget to record. They had a great engineer. I'm thinking, I can just fly on out to Memphis when they're done, walk in and say, play it for me, and be absolutely blown away and wowed. I don't have to micromanage these guys. They're old enough and mature enough to be able to do this themselves. How fucking stupid was I? I turn up in Ardmore, they play me what they got, and I go, that's it. And they were all as pleased as punch with what they had. And I went, not really, guys. This is subpar. Not good at all. And we had a disagreement and a parting of the ways. A couple of years or so later, I go to my mailbox and there's a little package in there, and I pull a package out and I look at it and I look at the Australian stamps and I go, interesting. And I open it up and I take out the CD and I look at the note with it. And it said, I think this was what you were looking for. Love, Brent. Eccles had sent me Skin and Bones.
Oh,
I took
God.
Skin and Bones. I took Skin and Bones home and went, yeah, guys, that's what I was looking for. What a terrific album. What a fucking terrific album. You know, but what's the irony? The album they did at Ardmore was their only ever number one.
Yep.
But when you have the miasma of GNR and there's a photograph of Doc, Axl, and Angry Anderson, one above the other, on stage at the Whiskey, that kind of whets the appetite. And what happened was that record sold before everybody went, yeah, it's okay. But it was their only ever number one. If I had to grab one Angels album as the boat is going down, it might well be Skin and Bones. That might be the one I'd take. Not Face to Face. I love 2 Minute Warning.
No Exit.
That's okay. I like the Howling better.
All right. They kind of get a little bit experimental on that one.
Yeah,
a little bit
the Howling pissed me off.
of...
MCA had it. So I went to MCA and I said, what do we need to do to form an agreement where I can take this thing off the shelf? And they said, oh, we'll think about it. Because I wanted to get the Howling out because they'd just shelved it. They hadn't released it here. And I got 2 inches of the Howling and I went and remixed it and put some more, a little bit more high-end and mid-range energy into it. And it was really good. And MCA, Musician Cemetery of America, refused to come to a deal of any sort because they were spiteful and just wanted to leave it. because what they didn't want is for Alan Niven to come along, take their record, put it out there, and have it work when they had just fucking dished it from the get-go. But that's your fucking record business for you, innit?
Yes.
I mean, you know, if we're talking about the record business, do you want me to go off on a rant about how little all the people who created the music get paid and who does get paid? Do you know that UMG make $1 million an hour profit on streaming? And how do they do that? They give away the material to the streaming sites. Very nice and generous of them, especially since they're either the primary or the sole owner of the streaming sites themselves. They behave like the mob would behave.
It's ridiculous how much the artist doesn't get. It's just 1 cent.
It's actually evil. It's robbery and just black hearts. Black hearts. But, you know, on the other thing, Peter, we started out talking about, you know, being in the mortal zone. I'm aware that I'm not going to live forever, but I'm really surprised at how many things I've been involved with 30 years ago are still around. In other words, you know, I know exactly what I want them to do with my remains. So I want to be cremated, and then they can take my remains down to Congo Square in New Orleans and throw them into the flower beds of Congo Square, the geographical place where Caucasian folk collided with African rhythms. And let's call it rock and roll. That's the geographical location. That's where I want my ashes, you know, and they'll have to do it on the QT. There's a couple of really good bars in the neighborhood that you can get drunk and then go and throw my ashes in Congo Square.
Absolutely. What's in the future for you in the next 12 months? More rock and roll tales? Maybe a speaking tour. Would you be interested in doing a speaking tour?
A speaking tour? I'm doing one right now.
Okay.
With you?
No, but live, in a live environment. I can imagine you're a bit of a raconteur, just like in front of an audience. Is that something that you'd ever think about doing?
I think I'd be nervous about it and shy. I would also question, how much is this going to be like a fucking rock and roll tour where I'm going to get up every night and say the same shit and try and be convincing and in the moment saying the same old stuff? What I love about this is the first time we met. It's completely fresh. I don't know who you are. I don't know what's coming. I've got to be on the ball. I've got to hope my brain works. I hope my memory works. I've got to try and connect and entertain a little bit. So in terms of saying this is a speaking tour, I think this is the greatest way to do a speaking tour.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had some fun talking to a lot of people about the book, which Axel is doing everything he can to try and stop from coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's, you know, at the end of the day, Axel, sorry, darling, you're just not a very nice guy. You know,
do you see that there might be a volume 2 in the works down the track, maybe?
Far be it for me to say it myself, but the reviews of the book have been extraordinarily kind and flattering, which may tempt one to think, oh, I can fucking write. I must be good. I tend to look at it at the moment and go, you spent a lot of time on it, and maybe you just got lucky. You had enough good stories and you knew enough about how to write that you got away with it. Don't fuck up and try and do another one.
The difficult second album syndrome, eh? Maybe just leave it as once and done.
Totally. And we all know about, I mean, you know, Don't Cry, You Could Be Mine, November Rain. All Appetite songs.
Interesting.
deliberately put on the shelf so as we'd have something when we got back off working Appetite, that we could have a backbone for an album and avoid, if we could, the sophomore slump, as they used to call it, the second album. You know, that band that's had 3-4 years to form their style and their material. They go out, they work for a year, they come back exhausted, they go and see their doctors to get their bodies repaired. And meantime, you've got the record company always doing what they're doing. Where's my record? We need to get another record out. Get in. So they go in there and they half-ass a record, and the next thing you know, that band, what happened to that band? They had a really great record. Oh, there was another record after that? Oh, I missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Alan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've been entertained.
Pleasure's been mine. Pleasure's been mine, Pete.
Absolutely fascinating. And maybe I'd like to, do some more down the track with you. So,
Good.
Alan Niven, check out the new book. I will promote the crap out of it on this channel. I'll put all the links below. Looking forward to hit the bookstores. And once again, Alan, all the best. And thank you for your time today. It's been appreciated.
Peter, pleasure was mine, and genuinely, anytime. Good conversation with good people is a pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Alan, and all the best, Rock Daydream Nation.